2024 election fried our brains. The Democrats couldn't hold a primary because they were too busy holding a body upright.
CNN is never, ever going to let this woman back on air. We're going to react to the comedian who went rogue live on CNN during their New Year's Eve coverage, and so much more in today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, across our politics, and across the media, all from an independent perspective. Guys, apologies in advance if I'm a little bit out of it today. I'm starting to feel like I am coming down with something, maybe a cold, but we're going to power through and do our best to get through today's episode. Anyway, up first, I went to bed at like 10:30, so I didn't wait up and watch the New Year's Eve coverage, but if you did, if you watched on CNN, you would have seen something rather unexpected because a comedian they had on went absolutely rogue, stunning Anderson Cooper and the other CNN host, and honestly, saying some truth bombs that I think will mean she's most certainly not going to be invited back on the network anytime soon. Some of the jokes that the comedian, Whitney Cummings is her name, made are just kind of politically incorrect. Like, I found this one funny that she said about the WNBA.
2024 totally broke our brains. Half the people I know think we're in a simulation. I'm starting to wonder. When I go to a website and it asks me if I'm a robot or not, half the time I get the quiz wrong. I'm like, does the shadow of a bike count as a bike? I don't know. Why am I looking at a grainy photo of a crack house? We just all broke mentally this year. Things got so bleak. We started watching the WNBA. What happened?
I do think the fact that even a liberal-leaning comedian like this would make a joke like this on CNN tells you a little bit of something about how maybe the culture is shifting a little bit and we're not so sensitive and so cancel culture intensive that you maybe can finally joke about issues related to sex and gender again without getting screeched at or having a Twitter mob come after you. But it's the political part of Whitney Cummings' set that really, I think, made some waves, left the other people on air on CNN absolutely silent, and we're going to react to that after a quick message from today's sponsor. Guys, it's a new year, and there is no better time to break your bad habits, which is why I'm so glad to be partnering with today's sponsor, Fume. Personally, I struggle not to bite my nails down to their nubs, but whatever your bad habit is, today's sponsor, Fume, has created a flavored air device. You can see it here. I keep it right by my desk for when I'm recording and filming. That's perfect for those moments when you want to fall back into those bad habits, but instead you need something enjoyable to reach for. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that draws flavor to your mouth. Personally, I like the crisp mint, but it is not a vape and it is not addictive. Plus, it is made to fidget with and can help calm your anxiety. Fume has already helped over 300,000 people break their bad habits. Try Fume today, and if you order using my promo code BradPolumbo, you'll get a free Fume topper, an awesome accessory to level up your experience. Go to tryfume.com/BradPolumbo or scan the QR code on screen now. You'll be glad you did. And now, back to today's show. Anyway, guys, here's the political part of what Whitney Cummings said on CNN last night, New Year's Eve, where I thought she dropped some truth bombs that I was not expecting to ever hear acknowledged on CNN, of all places.
2024 election fried our brains. The Democrats couldn't hold a primary because they were too busy holding a body upright. Are we still rolling? Am I off?
Go for it.
This one had me gagged. Obviously, the setting here is not great for like comedic timing. She's got no audience. She's got all this noise in the background. But what she said is actually really funny, that they couldn't hold a primary because they were too busy holding up a dead body. I mean, it's funny, but it's true. Biden was cooked and they went through this massive cover-up effort of trying to make sure nobody realized it rather than just actually acknowledging it and having a primary to elect a different candidate. And I love how she wasn't sure if they were still rolling. Like, are they going to cut away to her? I mean, I wouldn't have been shocked if they did, but it helps that it was live. Whenever you go into this kind of setting like CNN, you got to make sure it's live so they can't slice and dice it or edit you out if you cross their taboos, which she certainly did.
It was amazing that the pro-choice party didn't give their voters one when it came to the presidential candidate. Kamala was forced on us so hard you'd think she was patented by Pfizer or Moderna, whichever one's. Oh God, Andy just gave me a very scary look.
No!
She ate, I fear. One, the pro-choice thing is funny, and I mean, obviously the Democratic Party is a private institution. It doesn't have to have an election to select its candidates. It's allowed to do what it did and just put Kamala up, but it is ironic from the people who constantly preach and moan about democracy and how they believe in democracy and the will of the people to the fact that they totally usurped any sort of democratic process and just installed a candidate. Yeah, that is ironic, and it was kind of funny. But the real funny part of this was when she says Pfizer and Moderna, obviously making a jab at vaccine mandates. But what's so funny about that is if you watch cable news, you will have noticed that some of the most regular advertisers on there are pharma companies like Pfizer, like Moderna, and that's what she's hinting at there, and what clearly made the CNN hosts extremely, extremely uncomfortable. It just, chef's kiss from her on that one.
We all agree the government totally knows what drones are and aren't telling us. The drones are still up there, and we have no idea what's behind them. No idea. I mean, they're still up in the sky, so I guess we can rule out that they were made by Boeing. The point is, I think we all agree on a lot of things. And since I only have a minute left live on establishment media, why don't we just say a bunch of things that we know that they'll never cover? Okay, ready, go. Trump Jr. didn't have any silverware in his house. No one thought that was weird? Are we still rolling? Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia put money into Disney, so just know there won't be any girl characters in the next Cars movie. Are we still rolling? This is wild. Okay, why have so many presidents' chefs died? Weird. Boy Scout of America, they renamed itself Scouting America. You know who else changed their name? Sean Combs. Just saying. Let's learn something in 2025. I can't believe you guys are still letting me go. This is amazing. I love CNN. Please stop me, Andy, because I will just keep going.
Happy New Year, Whitney Cummings.
Am I still streaming?
Yes.
This is amazing.
I wasn't expecting that to be said on CNN in 2024. But there's a first time for everything? I guess. The Saudi Arabia one actually did have me gagged. I'm not gonna lie. That one was funny to me. But she certainly does raise some interesting questions that wouldn't normally get aired on CNN. She also directly roasted the network in another bit from another segment she was in that I want to show you because it was funny.
I love going around the country because you see that Americans really are more reasonable than they would be portrayed. They're pretty great, and I'm playing bigger and bigger venues now. I thought being a mom would mean that less people would want to come see me. I'm now playing, like 3,000 seat theaters,
awesome.
Which is about the viewership of CNN these days.
Well,
not
nice.
this show, though.
Nice.
Yeah, Whitney's not getting invited back. She used CNN's probably highest rated time of the entire year. Tons of people tune in on New Year's Eve to watch these guys, Anderson Cooper and Andy Cohen, I think, watch them do their New Year's Eve thing and get super drunk, of course, on camera. But normally, in normal times, CNN's ratings are plummeting. It is a fact. They are not doing well. People are tuning out because they're sick of the bias. They feel misled by a lot of the coverage. Even many liberals and Democrats are tuning out because they feel like CNN wasn't honest with them about Biden's mental state, about Kamala's strength as a candidate, and so much more. But she went on CNN and pointed that out. And I mean, kudos to you, girl. You got some balls on you to look Anderson Cooper in the face and just roast him and his network like that. But yeah, Whitney Cummings, I think she did amazing. I think it was really funny. It's really tough to try to do jokes or comedy in that kind of environment. And I'm very impressed that she pulled it off and dropped banger after banger like this. And honestly, it's just the kind of thing I wish we would see more in mainstream media and in journalism. Unexpected twists, guests who aren't just going to say prepackaged talking points and who might actually be unpredictable, because that's the worst thing about mainstream media these days. It's not that it's liberal. It's not that it's biased, though I wish they were more transparent and would just wear their bias on their sleeve like many other places do, like I do. But the real thing about it that I can't forgive is that it's so incredibly boring and predictable. And that's just not good television, not interesting media. And once in a while, somebody like Whitney Cummings comes around and reminds us what media actually should be. Unpredictable, relevant, and thought-provoking. But what did you guys think of this set and this moment from CNN? Do let me know in the comments below. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, we've got another misgendering meltdown on our hands.
Me and my girlfriend were going to a wine castle and we sat down for our tasting. And at first they were just very rude and didn't really answer our questions and we didn't really feel welcome. Our server said, "Yes, sir," when I was asking some questions. And I said, "Oh, no, I'm actually not a sir." And instead of apologizing, or I don't know what else you would do other than apologize.
So I'm gonna let it finish, but it's the entitlement for me. I don't know what else you would do but apologize, as if the whole world is obligated to speak in ways that affirm your political beliefs or your ideas about yourself and the world. Actually, not everybody has to conform to you. You are not the center of the universe, and your views are not some unquestionable truth that everybody else must bow down to. I mean, we really do have an epidemic of just entitlement and delulu on the internet. And frankly, as long as, you claim to be a trans woman, I have my doubts that you're actually that, but as long as you continue to present and appear so incredibly, painfully male, people are going to call you sir. And it's not a hate crime. It's simply, an honest, I don't even want to call it a mistake because, but it's an honest thing that people are doing. They don't mean to offend you. And then you're acting like it's just the worst thing ever and you're so uncomfortable when in reality, at some point you got to get a grip because the problem might just be you.
They just walked away, did not acknowledge what I said, just walked away. We saw the server whispering to a manager, and a few minutes later, the manager came over and, really big smile, not acknowledging at all that the misgender had happened.
Babes here really does talk about pronouns being misused like it's personal 9/11, like the misgendering happened. I remember where I was the moment it's not that deep. It's not that deep.
And I say, "Hey, look, the last person, they misgendered me and that really hurt." And they just walked away. And
I'm sorry, but at some point, that's on you. If somebody else's casual word choice can cause you deep emotional hurt, then that suggests to me that you don't actually have a secure sense of self, because there's nothing some stranger could say to me that would deeply hurt me, because I feel good about who I am. I feel confident about my identity, my purpose, who I am and what I stand for. And my sense of self-worth isn't tied to the affirmation of random strangers who, in many of this person's videos, seem like they aren't even fluent in English. And that's probably motivating some of the miscommunication, not some malice. So the fact that these minor incidents affect you so deeply emotionally, at some point, that's on you. That reflects your own lack of emotional resiliency and your own dependence on others for your sense of self, which is not how an emotionally mature adult functions. But I think we knew that this person is not an emotionally mature adult.
the manager said, "Oh, well, some people just aren't as progressive as you." And then they gave us a nice little chocolate that suggested they wanted our money but didn't want to say sorry. So we left and got a full refund.
You should not have gotten a refund if you ate your whole meal, which is what it sounds like. I mean, why would you get refunded? Just because you made unreasonable demands of somebody and they weren't met, and then they didn't grovel at your feet like you expect? You ate your whole meal, you paid for it, and you got a refund. So you scammed this restaurant, is what I'm hearing. The privilege of this person always strikes me. I mean, you're just constantly eating out at all these nice places and then posting to the internet like you're such a victim when, by everything we can see, you live a pretty chill and luxurious lifestyle. But maybe that's it. Maybe that's actually the grift or the scam, is go into restaurants knowing you look well like a man in every respect, and then get misgendered and then leverage that and your social media clout to get refunds and free meals. I think we're onto it. I think the gig is up here.
It's one thing to get misgendered and then get an apology, but it's another thing to get misgendered and then be told that it's okay and not to worry about it, and here's a chocolate.
Yeah, I mean, It is okay. It's not the end of the world, and other people don't have to agree with you. They're allowed to have their own beliefs. Like, what part of this do you not get? The manager actually had it right. This manager sounds based when that person said, oh, not everyone's as progressive as you. That's true. Most people aren't as progressive or as delulu as you, Lily. And I'm so sick of the entitlement that simply radiates from all of these videos and the harm that these kinds of TQ plus TikTok activists are doing to the entire LGBT community, making this entire category of people seem unreasonable and extreme when most of us really aren't. Most of us are not like this person, but Lily and their ilk are giving us all a bad name. And now we got to talk about more LGBT drama because JK Rowling just set off a new firestorm in the debate over trans rights. The Harry Potter author, who's become a very outspoken critic of the transgender movement and modern transgender activism, often from what she sees as a feminist perspective, has really ruffled some feathers lately because she put out a provocative tweet about the idea of a transgender kid. I'll read you what she said, and then we'll talk about the reaction to it, and finally, I'll give you my take. JK Rowling tweeted, "There are no trans kids. No child is, quote, born in the wrong body. There are only adults like you," because this is in response to a comment she got, "prepared to sacrifice the health of minors to bolster your belief in an ideology that will end up wreaking more harm than lobotomies and false memory syndrome combined." JK clarified her beliefs a little bit when somebody replied to her, and she replied to them, further explaining what she was saying and what she wasn't saying. Somebody wrote, "I will be blocked and condemned for saying this, but kids are not born in the wrong body, and the parents are the problem." To which JK replied, "Not always. Kids are watching TikTok videos of surgeons selling the idea that bodies can be modified like Lego. Schools affirm kids' trans identities behind parents' back. A certain kids charity in the UK sent out breast binders to pubescent girls without parental consent. Many parents are struggling to protect kids from a zeitgeist telling them that anxieties about puberty, sexuality, and growing up can be fixed by lifelong reliance on big pharma and by doctors who make Frankenstein look ethical." As you can imagine, the response to JK Rowling's statements has been pretty measured and really just, a stable conversation and critique. Some people disagreeing, some people agreeing, but just people discussing the issues rationally. Just kidding. I decided that I wanted to see what kind of the trans rights crowd were up to and were saying about this, so I headed over to the liberal website, Twitter alternative Blue Sky, and found some interesting takes about Rowling's statements there. Actor George Takei wrote of Rowling's post, "JK reveals herself here. Deplorable." A left-wing activist who calls himself The Serfs tweeted, "They used to say there was no such thing as gay kids, that it was a choice that could be beaten or tortured out of them through conversion therapy," in response to JK's post. And guys, I'll get into my full views on what JK said, and I don't actually agree with her, but let me just talk about this dumb comparison for a minute. Gay and trans are fundamentally different. They're not the same thing. Many kids or teenagers who experience gender dysphoria or gender confusion go through puberty and then stop experiencing that. Almost no one ever feels sexually attracted to the same sex and then that goes away. That's not really a thing, whereas that's a widely documented phenomenon that does and can happen with people who experience gender confusion or gender dysphoria as they go through puberty. So it's just a ridiculous comparison. And JK is not advocating for conversion therapy. She's advocating for letting minors go through puberty. Those aren't the same thing, dude. Another person wrote on Blue Sky, "If you put JK Rowling in a meat grinder and the only thing left of her was her eyeball, maybe then she could see that trans kids are real." You seem stable and well-adjusted. Another person reacted to this news and wrote, "JK Rowling now claims that trans kids don't even exist. She's losing her effing mind, all due to her obsession and hatred with transgender people." The LGBT media also attacked JK Rowling for these tweets. For example, The Advocate published a piece headlined, "JK Rowling falsely claims there are no trans kids." They debunked JK's statement by pointing out surveys where youth say they identify as transgender. They really don't get her point. Pink News wrote a similar piece on JK's statement, also citing a survey saying that trans kids, or a certain number of kids or youth, say they identify as trans. Guys, I don't even fully agree with what JK said, and I'll explain why, but I can at least comprehend it, where these LGBT activists don't even understand what she's saying. She is not saying that there are no kids who call themselves trans or who think they are trans. She's saying that she doesn't think kids can actually legitimately be transgender and that they are simply confused. Now, you might disagree with that, but she's not saying they don't exist. She's saying the concept isn't legitimate. It's not that hard to parse the distinction here if you actually want to approach this conversation or this debate in good faith. But I actually thought that what JK said here is not something I fully agree with, and not something I actually think is productive, because it is true, for sure, that there are tons of teenagers suddenly discovering that they're trans, and there are non-binary as a fad and all sorts of other things. But I think it's wrong to suggest that there are no and have never been any kids who are actually transgender. Although I do think that kind of rests on, well, what do you mean by transgender? Obviously, if you mean people that were born one sex and became the other, well, that doesn't exist at all. That's not possible. But if what you mean by transgender is simply somebody who experiences intense gender dysphoria, a diagnosed medical condition where your internal sense of self is not the same as your biological sex, and you experience extreme mental discomfort with your biological sex, well, that is something that exists and has long existed. And yes, some minors have been diagnosed with that condition and have experienced it for a very long time. Now, I think JK has a point that the huge uptick in this identification is in part due to social pressure and cultural contagion and things like TikTok and these crazy propaganda videos, but there always have been a small number of minors who did experience this from a very young age. I've talked to friends who are transgender who can remember at 5 feeling trapped in the wrong body. This is a condition that does exist, and I'm not sure it's helpful to say blanket trans kids don't exist. I think the better argument is that there is a small slice of society that experiences this medical condition legitimately, but that we don't know who's truly experiencing that versus who's caught up in this trend and this cultural moment, and that they actually need to go through their birth, sex, puberty to figure it out, because that's the process by which many of these gender-confused young people in the past grew out of their gender dysphoria and discomfort, or realized that they're actually just gay or lesbian and they aren't actually the other sex, they're not actually gender dysphoric. So we need to allow them to go through that and not put them through these irreversible medical transitions that can leave them sterilized and sexually unable to function for life. That's a much stronger argument, I think, than blanket declarations that trans kids don't exist, which I think do fuel the flames, do miss the nuance and context of the situation. So I don't agree with JK Rowling on this one. But I also think that people need to stop giving one person's words so much power and reacting in such an unhinged and hysterical manner anytime she says something about trans issues or trans people. Because I actually think that when you go back a few years, JK had a much more moderate position on the trans questions that I actually agree with more than the things she says now, but she has become pretty much just totally against rejecting basically all of it at this point. And I think that's in part because of the unhinged backlash and response she's constantly been getting from extreme activists, from haters, from antagonists and trolls. And that has the natural effect when it's so intense and so extreme, the backlash of pushing you further into your own camp, of making you defensive and making you double down in many cases, which is what I think we've seen with JK Rowling as she's become slightly more extreme on some of these questions and less moderate and less nuanced, in part, I think, because when she tried to be moderate, they attacked her viciously as a bigot anyway. So she at some point decided to keep speaking to the people who did appreciate the conversation with her, even if they were more extreme than she was, and she gravitated towards them over time. And I don't fully agree with her, but I can certainly understand that process and that kind of emotional and mental calculation. But what do you guys think? Do you agree more with me or with JK Rowling? I won't bite your head off if you have a different opinion, unlike the folks over on Blue Sky. Oh, and thanks again to today's sponsor, Fume. Remember to check them out at the link in the description or in the pinned comment. You'll be glad you did. Let me know in the comments below, and do hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet to the channel. We're growing so fast, and can't wait to do so much more with you guys this year. So much exciting content coming up. I will try to do another episode tomorrow. If I get significantly worse and I'm feeling even more under the weather, I might have to take the day off, but we will see, and I'll keep you updated. And with that, hopefully, we'll talk again tomorrow.